All right, I still have video disabled.
And so I'm moving Commissioners Ortega and Carter over. Hold on.
Welcome to the panel.
Can you hear me?
We can.
Thank
Okay.
you. Here.
I had a little problem getting in. I don't know why.
Yep. Nope. You're here.
Can you hear me? This is Victoria.
Yep, we can hear you, Victoria.
Okay, it won't let my camera turn on, however.
Let me
That's disabled.
find that function. I don't know why it turned everyone off. But Commissioner Carter, or I'm sorry, Commissioner McDonough, if you want to start, I could, you can go ahead and then I will work on the IT stuff on the back end here.
Yep, I think that's fine. We'll start without our videos. We're all on the call here. So I'll gavel the workshop to order. As you recall, the State Fair Board took action early last year, to eliminate their own police force that managed all their security at all events on the State Fair, including the State Fair on the State Fair campus. The Ramsey County Sheriff started conversations early on about providing that service. Became apparent that the county board was actually going to have to sign on to those contracts. So we had a conversation at the board level, really kind of in three parts. One is managing non-state fair events throughout the year and what that contract would look like, the state fair contract itself for the state fair, 11 days of the state fair. And then this larger conversation is just the right role for Ramsey County to play on. By the end of the year, we came to an agreement, based on the framework that this board put together to get us through that year, both for the annual contract for all events and the state fair specific contract. Part of that resolution was for Ryan to take a leadership role in convening folks to do, I would call like a after action report on how things went and how did they align with, the parameters we set out. And then also how did we meet expectations as far as the service to the community in the state fair. And then also an opportunity to continue the larger policy conversation here with Ramsey County providing that service. So with that, I'll kick it over to Ryan and Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll just give a few brief remarks, then we'll go to Scott, who will walk through some of the substance. Thank you for the summary on the background. Nothing to add to that. As we are compiling all of the information, the board had in the resolution asked for us to return before the end of the month of September, and we are doing that. And part of what we're here to say today is we are still compiling information, in part just because of the lag on things like payroll data. And because there are pieces here where we want to make sure we get as much information as possible as we go through. Deputy County Manager Scott Williams will share a little bit more of the detail. We did invite the Sheriff's Office to be a part of the conversation today and do plan to have follow-up questions that we send their way, since it appears they are not yet joining us to participate. We'll keep an eye out on the list of who is here today. Ultimately, there are a few questions in front of us as we move toward a more official and complete after action report that will be fully done, is slated to be back as a workshop on November 2nd. The questions as we move toward next year relate to the two joint powers agreements that have been signed for this year, but between the county board and the Minnesota State Agricultural Society. One of those two joint powers agreements, by way of background, created an agreement for security services across the property that is the fairgrounds for the entire year, or for the duration of the year outside of the state fair. And then the item that took front and center more often in terms of attention paid was policing services provided by the Ramsey County Sheriff's Office during the state fair. And we are really working to still compile that information about the during the state fair. Things like payroll data and the lag are pieces that we continue to get. I'll just add one final piece as we jump in. I have had an opportunity to continue to interact with the Sheriff's Deputies Federation, who represent our deputies in the department and talk about the experience from the perspective of the rank and file. And thanks to staff throughout our organization for stepping up and serving during the fair, as well as those who volunteered to serve underneath the Sheriff's Office police unit. And as a part of that, the Sheriff's Federation has both offered to provide a memo that will be part of the final after action report summarizing the experience of our officers. So that will be one of the elements included as well. To everything else, Deputy County Manager will walk you through, as well as an offer to meet and talk about the experience for commissioners who would like to hear more context on how it went, what went well, where were there challenges, any thoughts from that employee experience moving forward. So I wanted to mention that up front. I'll make sure to make the connection coming out of here today between the board and leadership from the Federation. And with that, I will turn it over to Deputy County Manager Williams to walk us through.
And Scott, before you jump in, thanks, Ryan, for that update. I'll ask commissioners write down any questions or comments so we can get through the full presentation. Then we'll have time at the end for questions, and then we'll move into the larger potential policy conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just a note that the Sheriff's Office is trying to get in. I'm working with me to try to get them in, working through the technical issues and whether or not we have them on the correct link or not. So I will. I've sent them the question that you asked me, and we'll see if we can get them in there. But they're standing by, trying to get in. So I will talk a little bit about the financial piece as while we're waiting for the Sheriff's Office folks to join us, as we continue to. I'm going to suggest that you message Kyle directly. I don't know if you have his cell phone number, but maybe you can work with them to try to get the correct link. The individual that you see is not on is not with them in the room, so we don't promote that person as a panelist. All right, as we're working on the technical side, very good. Thank you. The financial piece, the reason that we don't have a financial picture to present to you today is we simply don't have all of the payroll information for all the days covering the fair. The final payroll for the last 3 days of the fair, the Saturday, Sunday, and Monday of Labor Day weekend. We're actually on a different payroll than most of the rest of the days of the fair. So those final reports won't even be available till this Friday. So we knew going into today, we just were not going to have the full picture. There's also work being done by the Sheriff's Office to track down, make sure they've identified all the expenses that were related to providing the service under the State Fair Joint Powers Agreement. And that is going to take some time. But the Sheriff's Office is working with Holly, our Safety and Justice Service Team Controller, and the Finance Department to work on all the financial analysis and reporting to make sure we get this done. The Sheriff's Office has agreed to, with Finance, to process all expenditures from the fair actually everything from the beginning of from June, when they started providing services on the other joint powers agreement. As you recall, there's 2 joint powers agreements, one for the fair and one for everything else, the other 50 weeks out of the year, by October 15th. And are also agreed to project what the security services expenses will be through the end of the year. Get that to us by October 15th. So we'll have a kind of a look forward, to be able project expenses through the end of the year, project the costs and the revenue through the end of the year. We will, going forward, it'll be easier to track stuff because we've got it set up as a project now. As you recall, the services actually began before there was the first joint powers agreement in place. So there was no project to track against. And that was not set up until just recently. So tracking things is a little bit of a challenge, but going forward, it'll be easier because now everything is being coded to a project. And so that was, will be one of the lessons learned going forward. And in all of these different categories that we're looking at as part of this review, we'll be wanting to ask the question, if the county renews the joint powers agreements for 2022, if that were to happen, what changes would be desirable for any of these areas, including finance? And we know we use a Summit tracking code on for payroll, and Aspen tracking code for other expenses, and set up a full budget for this project, and look at set deadlines for for billing and reporting. So that would be part of the after action report. And looking forward to if we do this for 2022 and beyond, what would mechanisms we would want to set up to make this easier to track for a more complete picture and actually to budget in advance. So as far as the invoicing to date, as far as I know, the state fair has not been invoiced for the services that were provided during the weeks of the fair. But it appears, looking through Aspen, that they've been invoiced for services that were provided up to and into August. Not sure how far into August, but something in over $400,000 of services have been invoiced so far. But that does, to my knowledge, that does not include services provided for the fair. I see the sheriff's office is now on the call, and they may have additional information on the invoicing and the timing of that.
Director Mestad and Chief Deputy Methuselah, thanks for joining us. Sorry for the technical glitch at the outset. I'm going to walk through some of the other aspects of what our after action report will entail. But before we go there, is there anything you'd like to add to the financial after action perspective that Deputy County Manager Williams just briefly walked through, which is payroll data still coming in, invoicing still coming in, we're all working together on it. Do we miss anything from your perspective you want to make sure we have?
Mr. Chair, Commissioners, and Ryan, we probably are trying to log in to some of what was already said, so Kyle can provide some more information. But let me just, by way of opening comments, if you'll allow me just a couple minutes, just to thank the board. Thank you, Ryan. Thanks, Scott. Our finance department, our human resources and risk management, the ECC. This was truly a team effort, a Ramsey County team effort that could not have been done without everybody stepping up to the plate and working together as a team. That happened, and I think that's a credit to everyone of how successful this was. And I can tell you from being on the grounds of the fair every day, this did not go unnoticed by the citizens and attendees of the fair. Numerous times they came up to thank the county board, to thank county management for stepping up. I was really surprised to find how many citizens were really tracking the media articles on the security and the policing plan for the state fair and making their decisions on whether or not to attend accordingly. And so it's really a credit to the board and the county for everything they've done. And one thing I would really be remiss, I just have to take a minute to call out, is the fabulous work by our Emergency Communications Center. Never seen anything better at an event than the type of service they provided. A couple examples, we had some inclement weather there, and we didn't have really a great long lead time when the National Weather Service was announcing these 50-mile-an-hour winds and torrential rainforest. they rapidly geofenced the area and were messaging everyone's cell phones who were on the grounds to direct them to places of safe shelter. So what could have really been an unsafe day that really ruined the fair for that day, people got in, they got shelter, spent their 40 minutes, they came out, the fair resumed without a hitch, and they were dry. Secondly, we had a significant number, at least to me, a significant number of missing children. And the thoroughness of getting those descriptions of the children and their parents and the accuracy to pinpoint their locations was absolutely second to none. We were able to easily reunite lost children with their families because of the great work by the ECC. So I just didn't want to let time pass without making those general comments, but Kyle has been boots on the ground with all the financial information, so hopefully he could kind of pick up where we left off, although we may have missed some.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Dave. Kyle?
Mr. Chair, Commissioners, so we heard the tail end about Scott talking about invoicing. So to date, 5 invoices have been provided to the state fair. We've recognized that revenue, $463,420. That is June, July, part of August. So with the pre-fair starting in August, the invoices are current as through about August 8th. Then we'll do a separate invoice for pre-fair and the fair itself, and then resume a regular billing schedule for patrol services like we do for the contract cities. I don't know if Scott, if you had a chance to talk about it, but the state fair span 2 separate pay periods, which each pay period there's a 2-week lag. So we're at a 4-week lag for actuals, and that's the delay here. So mid-October, we're thinking everything will post and run through, then we'll do the reports and we'll transfer the expenses and so on.
Perfect. I think with all that, knowing that we've got more information to come to have a deeper dive into the actual after action report, I'll turn it over to Ryan for questions and issues to be addressed. I think we've highlighted all that, but I'll give you another chance real quick. Then we can move into commissioners' questions, and then I'll allow some time for the bigger policy piece we talked about.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll just briefly highlight the rest of what the after action report should likely include. And if there's something we missed, we'd love to hear that during the discussion. So obviously the financial piece you've already heard about is a key component to that. It's all coming together on the timeline that would be outlined to be back before you on November 2nd. In addition to that, we will look at operations, which would include staffing levels during the fair. Were they adequate? How did the other joint powers entities work? What adjustments would the sheriff's office suggest are desirable if there were a renewal into 2022? In looking beyond staffing, looking at the operations specifically during the fair, what went well? Were there any policy compliance challenges that were involved when you bring together a force that goes beyond the traditional everyday Ramsey County Sheriff's Office group of employees? Any challenges in communication or coordination? And better understanding some descriptions around the nature of the typical types of engagements required during the 2 weeks of the fair. High risk, other notable incidents. These were questions that came up in the conversations on the front end. Looking beyond operations, we'll also then look at the security services joint powers agreement more broadly. What staffing levels are needed to cover those weeks outside of the fair if we were to continue that agreement for all of 2022? Are there enough deputies currently to cover those agreements? Example of typical enforcement actions, if any, and any operational adjustments or changes. Then the final major section would involve impacts of the joint powers obligations on any other areas of the sheriff's office operations. And so questions around, were there operational impacts of having to draw deputies from other areas? Were there operational impacts of during the non-fair times in the same question? Status of any ongoing labor issues related to the services provided. Generally, what you hopefully hear in those topics are that the questions that you raise prospectively are now ones that we can look at with hindsight and lessons learned. And we're hopeful that the sheriff's office will help us answer those questions, because I'll be honest in saying I cannot answer them alone, and I am ill situated to be able to. So we appreciate having the sheriff's office here today. I will finally end with one topic not on there, just to note that's unique to this year, but one that we just need to continue to recognize too. We did have employees contract COVID that we believe happened through their service at the fair. And that's a recognition of the continued frontline work across our organization during these periods. They are not the only employees, obviously, to contract COVID. So there is a dynamic of the workers' compensation piece, which was in the joint powers agreement as something that Ramsey County assumes that we take on. And there were some serious impacts in at least a few limited circumstances, I think, related to COVID and the fair this year. And I just wanted to bring that in because I want to recognize employees who, in service to the community, contracted COVID as a part of it. And we'll get whatever information we can there from public health and human resources as we move forward. With that, Mr. Chair, I'd stand for any discussions, suggestions, or questions as we go.
Thanks, Ryan. Thanks, Scott, Kyle, Dave. It's clear we got more information to come forward. We've gotten, a little bit of what we have, but clearly we need much more information. Question to you, Ryan. My recollection is in conversations with Scott and prepping for this that early November, if I recall right, we would have all that information, and we've already got dates set on the calendar for the final after action report, not only on the financial stuff, as you pointed out, but kind of the bigger policy impact or pieces here, impact the statutory requirements, impact the contract cities, impact the employees, and forced overtime as such.
Mr. Chair, yes. Chair Carter and Budget Chair Reinhardt, through the conversations during the budget cycle, set aside November 2nd and November 9th for key issues to discuss, if any, with the sheriff and the county board. We plan to use the November 2nd timeline to address one of those topics, which is State Fair After Action Report. So November 2nd is the scheduled date to bring back the full report.
Perfect, thank you. And then I just want to go to Dave Methuselam and Kyle, just to get assurances from the sheriff's office that November 2nd or November 9th, working with the county manager and Deputy County Manager Scott, that we'll be able to have all the information to continue the conversation.
Chair McDonough, commissioners, yes, we could definitely make that work, and we look forward to this kind of deeper dive. It'll help inform, if you choose to continue in a JPA with the State Fair, it'll help inform our future planning and operations for next year.
Perfect, thank you, Dave. All right, commissioners, any questions or comments on the after action piece and the report you got back from folks, knowing that we'll have complete information in early November? I'll open it up for questions. I see Commissioner Reinhardt, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I want to note that, as was stated, I, along with Chair Carter, have set aside those 2 dates in November. One of the issues that was listed at that point was about the after report, but also there were a number of other issues, and including contract cities and non-contract cities and the services, some of the policies within those jurisdictions that have their own police departments and so forth. And we did request at that time that the sheriff attend those. And I would hope that at this point, especially if they are virtual, we don't know what's going to happen at that point, but that he be there. But the other, I wanted to, and I know it's kind of implicit in what was said as far as the after report, but I want to say it explicitly, and that is that if there is revenue over the cost, or if there is a deficit over the cost, that's something we need to really look at. And we've been assured that there would be that there wouldn't be a deficit, but who knows? I mean, you don't know going in exactly how that's going to work out, but I want to make sure that that is part of the after report. And if there is revenue, we as a county board, I think, should be able to decide where that goes. If there is a deficit, obviously, we as a county board have to decide how that has to be covered. And so I think it goes both ways. So I think that that's going to be important information for us to have. And finally, I wanted to comment that I was at an event and Governor Walz talked to me about the fact that he was so appreciative of the fact that Ramsey County stepped up to allow the state fair to happen this year. He also stated that we need to do something that is a longer term solution, meaning through the legislature and with the state stepping up, because relying on one local government to step up on the state fair, Minnesota State Fair, didn't seem the best way to go. So I know that we've talked about that, but I think that, you know, the fact that he brought it up to me, again, thanking me, but also saying, you know, we need to do better as a state, so, as far as the cost and how this was put together. That may still mean that, you know, it's Ramsey County. I don't know what that means, but we need to explore that through the legislature. And I wanted to make sure that I put that on the record here. And if there are any questions, I know there were other commissioners that were at that event also, so they may have some comments on it as well. Yep. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Reinhardt. There was a specific question about revenue. Does anybody want to take that, or do we want to include that in the November update?
Mr. Chair, that fits well in the November update, and it aligns with the language in the Joint Powers Agreement, so we'll report back at that time.
Thank you. Commissioner Mattis-Castillo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to make sure that when we come back and talk about the after action report, that we include talking about where there was wear and tear, both on equipment, but on people as well. I know we had talked that the Federation is going to share part of the AR, but I think it's really important for us to think about that. Additionally, you know, as I'd like to hear about how staffing went. I know that at the end we are scrambling to get more and more people signed on to work the fair, and the numbers for the fair were significantly lower than previous fairs or potentially future fairs. And so to think about what went well, where there's areas of concern, or what didn't go well, and then what we can do better as part of the decision-making process.
Good points there, Commissioner Mattis-Castillo. I've seen Scott writing, I believe, and writing those down to help be prepared to answer those. I don't think there's a need for comment, but if somebody does, I'm confident they'll be a part of the conversation in November. I don't see any other hands. It looks like we'll all be looking forward to that meeting in November to get that deeper and more fuller dive. I did want to take a moment, since we're pulled together here, because we spent a lot of time on the bigger question, and Commissioner Reinhardt actually brought it up in the conversations with Governor Walz about, really, is this a state responsibility versus a local responsibility? You know, the timing of the state fair board decision, you know, operating as the Minnesota Agricultural Society, really forced us to, you know, figure out how we could get this done so the residents of Ramsey County or of the state could really address or participate in the state fair that they had missed last year. And we did that, and we'll find out how all that went. But I did want to, because we, you know, in some ways we don't need that information to maybe start the conversation with the state, whether it's a legislature and or the governor's office, I think both, about what does these two contracts look like moving forward into next year, and where does the board see its role in either leading those conversations or pushing those conversations to ensure that it's really more of a fully vetted conversation about where does this responsibility lie, and the risks and the impacts and how it's managed. You know, I'll point out the state manages its own security and policing at almost all its facilities already. The state fair is managed by this department, or the Minnesota Agricultural Society, which is a creature of the state, not the county. And so I'll open it up for any conversations to see where board members want to go with that. If you want to start that now and maybe start a parallel process, or if you just want to wait till November when we have a deeper dive onto the after action report. Commissioner McGuire, I see your hand up.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. You said it really well. I'll just say that I think those are conversations we want to have, and we can start them as soon as we want, because I think whatever the report.
Commissioner McGuire, could you slide your microphone down?
Sorry,
please?
sorry. I forgot I had it up. Thank you. I just want to say thanks to Commissioner McDonough for framing that question. I think that is a really important one, and I'm happy to have it. You know, I'm waiting for the final report and the final numbers, but I think that is the major conversation we need to have, is whether this is really something that's Ramsey County function or not. And so I'm happy to have those conversations whenever we can get them on the schedule. But as part of the end of your report, Mr. Chair, if I could just add, make sure that this is on the list, and I'm sure it is. But and maybe it's already out there, but the number of incidents that did happen at the fair, I know you mentioned there were a lot of lost children, but I know there was one incident. I was actually at the fair on that Saturday night. Was it a Saturday or a Sunday? A Sunday night. The Sunday night, when there was an incident at the front gate, which I was handled. I was watching the cars go, the police cars go there. I wasn't at the actual scene. But so I know there were a few incidents that did happen that were handled, but I would just hope that we get an accounting of the kinds of things that did happen. So, and as I said before, happy to have these bigger conversations anytime.
Great, thank you. I seen Scott writing that one down, so great. Commissioner or Chair Carter, I see your hand up.
Thank you. I really appreciate this early discussion, although we don't have all of the information in yet. And just want to note that as we approached the signing of the joint powers agreements and the arrangements that we needed required that the governor's voice be a part of the process moving forward, we asked the governor to send us a letter sharing with us his perspective. The governor, our public safety commissioner, and the Department of Admin all accepted their role on behalf of the state to make certain this was able to work out this year, although they did not accept the entire responsibility for making it happen. They were very thankful that Ramsey County stepped up and assured us that should anything happen at the fair that went beyond the ability of the contracts and the insurance to cover, that they would work with us. The governor would work with us to go to the legislature. My point being, the acknowledgement that was given to this as a statewide responsibility makes it clear and apparent to me that we should ask the governor to convene upcoming discussions about securing the fair for 2022 and beyond. Otherwise, with Ramsey County taking on that responsibility to have this discussion, by default, we are saying we are going to be the future. We played a very big role, but it is a statewide responsibility. So I would want to request, as we did this past year, that we hear the governor's voice, but now we have more time to hear the governor taking, along with the legislature, the responsibility with the right steps formatted to assure that next year we have the configuration that is supported by the state. So my suggestion is that we take the request directly to the governor at this point to convene the next step conversations while we pull in all of the additional information and are able to have our final report and discussion in November.
Thank you, Tony. I think that's a wise recommendation. I think having this parallel process of continuing to get the in-depth after action report can help influence that parallel conversation. I think your suggestion to reach out to the governor to specifically ask him to convene that group makes great sense, especially with the report out from Commissioner Reinhardt that he's continuing to recognize that. And I do want to thank you, Chair Carter, for the work you did in securing that letter for the governor. I see some shaking of heads here about that potential support of your recommendation to make that request of the governor. And I would suggest that should come from you, Chair Carter, and the county manager. And then we'll continue to move forward on the after action report. Shaking of the heads, Victoria, Trista, Raphael, Nicole, Mary Jo. All right. I will give Ryan, Scott, and Dave and Kyle an opportunity for last words. Dave and Kyle, anything that you would like to add here before we close out our session?
Mr. Chair, I do think you have Commissioner Fretham first.
Oh, all right. Oh, she's behind my reverse the camera signal there. I'm in the corner. Commissioner Fretham, thank you. Thanks for your patience and understanding there. I missed you.
No problem. I just wanted to know agreement with Commissioner Carter's proposal to involve the state. There was also talk of, if there should be a parallel process, if we're going to continue to look on our end solutions. I'm hoping that the state fair piece could be part of kind of that broader conversation around contract and contract services and how that's done with the sheriff's office, and make sure we're not losing sight of that within the bigger picture, because I think having a broader understanding of how contracting and contracting services work across the county will really help us ground in terms of what is it we would ask for in a future proposal, even if we do that in partnership with the state.
Yeah, no, good point there, Commissioner Fretham. And I think Commissioner Reinhardt, as budget chair, kind of laid that out for the deeper and broader conversation, working with the sheriff's office moving forward in many areas such as this. So I think that's, and I see Commissioner Reinhardt shaking her head. Yes, that is the expectation, to be a part of that broader conversation. So, all right, I'll go back to Kyle and Dave. Any last comments here?
Mr. Chair, Commissioners, no real final comments. Just want to thank you and county management for your leadership, and we look forward to over the next month plus working on getting you the information you need, and hopefully also getting from the fair a more specific request for services that we can work off of as well.
Great, thank you, and thanks for being here, and give our regards to Sheriff Fletcher, please. Ryan or Scott, any final comments from you two?
This was very helpful to hear the part about how to align with the governor's office and move forward. We'll also invite them to be a part of the day on the 2nd, I think, and have his office here, I think might be helpful, so we can all get together. I had actually one request back to Chief Deputy Methusalem and to Director Mestad, which is, at the end of the day, if there is not an interest in pursuing a go forward from the sheriff's office perspective, I think in some ways there's an assumption that there may be an interest because there was enthusiasm the first time this year. But at the end of the day, I just want to open the door to also say, if there are concerns that come up between now and November 2nd, it would be helpful to know that before we get to November 2nd. I want to just make sure I'm inviting that to be an okay response. It would change the way in which we approach the governor's office and other pieces. And so I'm not putting you on the spot right now about where you're at exactly, but I think the next month gives us a chance to get through that. So we're being able to make sure we're all hearing each other and where we would like to come out. Great,
thank you. I see Dave, thumbs up, Ed shaking his head, nodding his head in affirmation that he got that request. So, all right, anything else from anybody here? I think we got through a lot, but we got a lot more work to do, and I think we've got a solid plan laid out, parallel plan laid out on moving forward. So, seeing no more questions or hand raised, I want to thank everybody for everything that we've done together up to this point, and recognize the fact that over 1 million people did get to enjoy state fair this year, and we have been seeing other events occurring at the state fair that the community has missed over the last 18 months. So with that, I will adjourn our workshop. Take care. Thank you.